Alright, to get started we're going to start with our, this is a check nymph from Partridge, size 10. It's a 3.3 tungsten bead. You could go with the 2.8, it just depends on how heavy you want it to get. And I usually start off with some lead-free wire underneath, and this is 015. You can go bigger, just depends on how heavy you want it to get. So usually start above the hook point and then up to right before the tungsten bead, and then I just shove all that up inside. I start my thread right behind that lead and kind of lock that in there and take a few wraps up in, again, just to kind of create more of a smooth taper here, and locks everything in place. And we're going to do this as efficiently as possible. And this is the actual pattern how Lance ties it. So you know, there's several different ways and variations here, but this is kind of the way of the master. So I first start off with a couple of strands of peacock herl, and I like to tie everything first for this first little clump right behind this lead-free wire, not down at the bottom. So when we tie this in, we need to make sure that it's going to make it all the way back down there. And so we'll just attach that. Hold your thread tight and those will pop right off. Now we're just going to leave them hanging out like that. It's not going to stay that way, of course. And we'll tie in next our mono, which is going to be the last thing that we wind up the body. So this is just some 5X good old tippet, and again tie that in right in that same area. And then the final piece of that is some crystal flash. Same deal, tie it in there. Now we're going to take all of these pieces of material and hold them and kind of make our way down to the bend of the hook. Like so. Now we'll clip this off, the peacock herl off a little later. So next thing we're going to do is create a dubbed body, and I like to do this dubbing noodle method. I like the bodies to be a little tighter because this is a caddis, not a scud. And the dubbing we use is this hairtron dubbing. If you haven't tried this, this is great stuff. It's a good mixture of the natural rabbit with some antron. And so it's got a good amount of flash, but it's got a natural feel to it. So I'm just going to grab a clump of that and basically just create a dubbing noodle. You just twist that on, and we're going to dub a body. Alright, so I've created the dubbed body. Next thing I'll do is grab my crystal flash, and I'm going to rib the body with this crystal flash, nice and even. And then I'm going to tie that off right there. You could also put the thorax in, but I like the ribbing to be just on the olive part, or the light part. Again, the color schemes here are endless. Okay, now the thorax is going to be some Arizona synthetic dubbing in peacock. It creates a good variation, and it's going to look like the natural. I will warn you, however, this stuff is very difficult to dub unless you've got a little bit of dubbing wax. So I use this touch dub. It's great stuff. We sell it on the website. And this will just make sure that I can create a nice even amount of dubbing that will stay on the thread. And this is just for the thorax, right behind the bead. And I want to leave a little bit of a space there because I have to tie all the stuff in, or tie it off. And so that's a good amount, just a little bit right there. And now, this is where this one gets a little different than probably any other scud or caddis pattern you've tied. I'm going to take my scud back, and this is a 1/8 inch summer duck. This is a great color. And what I'll do is I'll tie this in right here behind the bead. And what I like to do is leave a little bit of extra hanging over that I can chop off. And then I'm going to cinch that down into that little hollow space there that I didn't dub over with the dubbing. And I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to clip this yet. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull this summer duck scud back, and again you want to make sure it's tied in decently tight there. And we'll pull it back and we're going to wrap forward with a mono over it to secure it. But before I do that, one of the little tricks I've learned on this is I like to make sure that the mono is already ready to take a wrap. So I usually pass it one time back around the hook, and so that it's just on this side of the hook towards me, so that when I pull this down over, I'm going to angle the scud back a little bit more towards me, and that makes it so that I can catch this, and the torque of applying that down will actually just twist that into place really easily, and it will make it so that it doesn't get bound up. So that first wrap, you want it to be fairly snug, and then from there you can adjust how centered this is, and this is not very centered, so I'm going to adjust it, and now we've got it a lot more centered. And now I'm just going to follow the crystal flash ribbing. You don't want to let go of this. And so wherever there was a crystal flash wrap, we're going to take the mono, and I like to give it a nice firm tug as we come down over the scud back. That creates a nice indentation, allows you to see the crystal flash through that, and then it creates a nice clear segmentation there for us. So you can see that's very clear. And I can come in here now, and you don't want to be super close to that last wrap, so I'll usually leave a little bit of a skin flap down. And then obviously trim up our peacock herl. And then trim off my mono. And lastly, I'm going to pull the scud back and take a couple of wraps in front, and then just trim that off as well. You got to pull that up. And to finish this, just to kind of give it a clean tie-off point, we're going to take a little tiny bit more of the peacock synthetic dubbing and tie that in. Again, not much. I'm going to create a couple of wraps there, and then I like to start my whip finish as that's on there. So that my whip finish ends right as the dubbing wears off. Trim that with our quick cut. And there we have our GTI Caddis.